Kunjabi Hari Jaya Gopi Janavale Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Janavala Girivaradari Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravana Jahari Yamuna Tiravana Jahari Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Haribo 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo Jaya Jagannath Jaya Jagannath Jaya Baladev Jaya Subhadra Jaya Jagannath Jaya Jagannath Jaya Baladev Jaya Subhadra Jaya Radha Giridhari Radha Giridhari Giridhari Jaya Radha Giridhari Radha Giridhari Giridhari.
Thank you, Mataji. We will just read Prabhupada's Leela Mirza now. Abhicharan Prabhu.
Yes, Mataji, I'm just sharing the screen first. So can everybody see the screen now?
Yes, Mataji. Yes, Prabhu, sorry.
So I'm reading from Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita. His past life was seeming farther and farther behind him each day. But one day, after he had been in Jhansi about 6 months, a telegram arrived, bringing a startling reminder of his past connections. His business in Allahabad had been burglarized. His servants had stolen all his money and medicine and everything else of value. It had been a loss of 7,000 rupees. Abhay read the news, laughed, and uttered the Bhagavatam verse. Jasyaham grahami harishe tadhanam shanoi tato dhanam tejayanti asha shajana dukha dukhitam. Prabhakar Mishra advised Abhay to go back to Allahabad to recover what he could. No, Abhay said, this is good for me. I was sad, but now one great attachment has come to an end, and my life is fully surrendered and dedicated to Sri Sri Radha Madhava. Abhay's son Vrindavan soon arrived in Dasi, requesting Abhay to come to Calcutta to receive the business. Abhay Charan De and sons. As they sat together in Abhay's room at Radha Memorial, Abhay explained that he could not go. He requested Vrindavan to stay and assist him by doing typewriting, but Vrindavan returned to Calcutta. Hare Krishna.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 21, Text 31. Yad pada seva borichus tapashvinam ashesha janmo pachitam malam diya sadya shinoti anuham idhati sati yata padangushta krishta sharit yat pada seva borichus tapashvinam ashesha janmopachitam malam diya sadya shinoti anvaham idhati sati yata padangushta krishta sharit yad pada seva borichis tapashvinam ashesha janmopachitam malam diya sadya shinoti anvaham idhati sati yata padangushta krishta sharit yad pada, whose lotus feet, seva, service, abhiruchi, inclination, tapashvinam, persons undergoing severe penances, ashesha, innumerable, janma, birth, upachitam, acquire, malam, dirtiness, diyaha, mind, sadyaha, immediately, shinoti, destroys, anvaham, day after day, idhati, increasing, sati, being, yata, as, pada angushta, the toes of his lotus feet, vinirishta, emanating from, sarit, water. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. By the inclination to serve the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, suffering humanity can immediately cleanse the dirt which has accumulated in their minds during innumerable births. Like the Ganges water, which emanates from the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord. Such a process immediately cleanses the mind, and thus spiritual or Krishna consciousness gradually increases. Purport. In India, one can actually see that a person who takes a bath in the Ganges water daily is almost free from all kinds of diseases. A very respectable Brahmana in Calcutta never took a doctor's medicine. Even though he sometimes fell sick, he would not accept medicine from the physician, but would simply drink Ganges water, and he was always cured within a very short time. The glories of Ganges water are known to Indians and to ourselves also. The river Ganges flows by Calcutta. Sometimes within the water there are many stools and other dirty things which are washed away from neighbouring mills and factories. But still, thousands of men take baths in the Ganges water, and they are very healthy as well as spiritually inclined. That is the effect of Ganges water. The Ganges is glorified because it emanates from the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord. Similarly, if one takes to the service of the lotus feet of the Lord, or takes to Krishna consciousness, he is immediately cleansed of the many dirty things which have accumulated in his innumerable births. We have seen that in spite of the very black record of their past lives, persons who take to Krishna consciousness become perfectly cleansed of all dirty things and make spiritual progress very swiftly. Therefore, Prithu Maharaj advises that without the benediction of the Supreme Lord, one cannot make advancement, either in so-called morality, economic development, or sense gratification. One should therefore take to the service of the Lord, or Krishna consciousness, and thus very soon become a perfect man, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Shipram bhavati dharmatma sajvak chantum nigachati. Being a responsible king, Prithu Maharaj recommends that everyone take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus be immediately purified. Lord Sri Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita that simply by surrendering unto him, one is immediately relieved of all sinful reactions. As Krishna takes away all the sinful reactions of a person immediately upon his surrender unto him, similarly, the external manifestation of Krishna, the representative of Krishna, who acts as the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, takes all the resultant actions of the sinful life of the disciple immediately after the disciple's initiation. Thus, if the disciple follows the principles instructed by the spiritual master, he remains purified and is not contaminated by the material infection. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore stated that the spiritual master, who plays the part of Krishna's representative, has to consume all the sinful reactions of his disciple. Sometimes a spiritual master takes the risk of being overwhelmed by the sinful reactions of the disciples and undergoes a sort of tribulation due to their acceptance. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore advised that one not accept many disciples. Jnana Timanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshum Mulitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Excuse me. Translation again. By the inclination to serve the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, suffering humanity can immediately cleanse the dirt which is accumulated in their minds during innumerable births. like the Ganges water which emanates from the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord. Such a process immediately cleanses the mind, and thus spiritual or Krishna consciousness gradually increases. So here we are in the 4th canto, hearing from Maharaj Prithu. So he's instructing those in the assembly. He's instructing his citizens. And we have some very powerful messages that come through these instructions. And it's very clear here what leaders of society or what leaders of humanity conceive of as the best information to depart to their citizens. So here we're hearing directly from Maharaj Prithu that the inclination to serve the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead will immediately cleanse the dirt which is accumulated in the mind, not just within this lifetime, but within many lifetimes. So this is very powerful information on many levels. One is that it's a very clear process of how to cleanse the mind. And it's also pointing out that we've had innumerable lives. So sometimes, or often in our daily life, we can become so focused within our daily life, within this lifetime, within the understanding that we are these temporary bodies and that this lifetime is all in all. But here, just in one verse, one instruction by Maharaj Prithu, we're hearing that there's been innumerable births, not just 1, 2, 3, or 4, but innumerable births. And that is, the power of the knowledge coming through Srimad Bhagavatam, through Chaitanya Charitamrita, that we're learning that this cosmos, this universe, these lifetimes is all on such a vast scale. It's beyond our material conception. So not only through this lifetime have we accumulated dirt in our minds, but through innumerable births. And this is a very clear instruction of how to clear up that issue. Like the Ganges water, which emanates from the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord, such a process immediately cleanses the mind, and thus spiritual or Krishna consciousness gradually increases. So again, a couple of important points there. The process immediately cleanses the mind, and spiritual or Krishna consciousness gradually increases. So, in Kali Yuga, we want action, immediate things happening right now. But what we're hearing here is that it's a gradual process. So while there's immediate benefit, the process immediately cleanses the mind, there's also a gradual increase. So if we think about it, say an example is one house and it's been really neglected and not looked after for, say 5 years. Nobody's done any cleaning, there's cobwebs and, everyone left a bit of a mess before they left and, there was mud and rubbish left and it's just accumulated and kind of sat like that for 5 years. So you can imagine, the house is looking pretty bad. But our mind has been accumulating stuff for innumerable births. So the subtle body, which includes the mind, intelligence, and false ego, has become quite contaminated over the lifetimes. So it's going to take a bit of a process to get that clean. And there is a process to get that cleaning happening, and Maharaj Prithu, he's kindly instructing us about that process. So in the beginning, just even by the inclination to serve the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, suffering humanity can immediately cleanse the dirt which has accumulated in their minds during innumerable births. So even just by this inclination and this beginning on this process of Krishna consciousness, so kindly shared with us by Srila Prabhupada, even by beginning, we're starting in the right direction, and that process will immediately start cleansing the mind. And then Prabhupada writes here in the purport, Actually, a person who takes a bath in the Ganges water daily is almost free from all kinds of diseases. So similarly, by absorbing our minds and our consciousness daily in the process of Krishna consciousness, we will become free of all kinds of diseases of the mind, intelligence, and false ego. Not necessarily of the material body, but we will, if we are engaging in the process of Krishna consciousness, we'll also manage our material body in a different way. So it's quite an amazing thing to think of, the Ganges water. I'm sure most of you have been there before and seen the Ganga and seen the River Yamuna. And from the material perspective, as Prabhupada writes here, sometimes within the water there are many stools and other dirty things which are washed away from neighbouring mills and factories. But still, thousands of men take baths in the Ganges water, and they are very healthy as well as spiritually inclined. That is the effect of the Ganges water. Because as we understand, the Ganges water emanates from the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord. So it's not ordinary water. And many people and scientists have tried to examine this phenomena over the years, because from one perspective we can see, well, it just looks like a river, like any other river. With so many rivers in New Zealand, that they're always having to analyse the quality of the water and see if it's clean and if it's taking diseases. And then, you go to India and there's factories, there's cremations, there's, bodies floating in the river. There's so many things. And you think, well, clearly the water quality must be of concern. And yet every day people bathe in the Ganga. They wash, they wash clothes, they bathe themselves, they purify their head. We have Ganga water that we use daily in our puja for Krishna. So the Ganges is not an ordinary affair, but from a material perspective, it can look challenging. But yet we understand that because it emanates from the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord, that it has a purifying quality and it can't be materially contaminated. So Prabhupada writes here, similarly, if one takes to the service of the lotus feet of the Lord, or takes to Krishna consciousness, he is immediately cleansed of the many dirty things which have accumulated in his innumerable births. So we might not be living in India currently. We might not be able to bathe in the Ganga or the Jamuna daily. And we are able to bathe in the mercy of the Lord through the 9 processes of devotional service. So by the inclination to serve the lotus feet of the Lord through hearing, chanting, and the other processes of devotional service, we can immediately get that same benefit that we can take to the service of the Lord and be immediately cleansed of the dirty things which have accumulated in our innumerable births. And if we make this a daily practice, so if we daily chant our rounds, if we daily hear or read from the Srimad Bhagavatam or remember verses, if we're busy and we don't have time to sit down and read, we can learn verses and meditate on those verses throughout our day. We can quote verses when we're driving in the car, try and, if you're going from one place to another, there's so many ways that we can immediately remember Krishna and hear about Krishna and glorify Krishna, even within our daily life. We've been given this potent process that we can access at any time. We don't need to go and jump in the Ganges. We can jump into the remembrance of the Lord's pastimes, his instructions, his Srila Prabhupada's instructions, Srila Prabhupada's teachings. We can dive into this opportunity to cleanse the mind at any time. So this is a very fortunate process for us. We don't have to physically be somewhere. We can mentally take ourselves there. And Preeti Maharaj instructs something very important here, that without the benediction of the Supreme Lord, one cannot make advancement either in so-called morality, economic development, or sense gratification. One should therefore take to the service of the Lord or Krishna consciousness, and thus very soon become a perfect man. So there's this understanding that nothing happens without the mercy of Krishna, not our ability to control our senses, not our ability to engage in Krishna consciousness, not our ability to engage in the material energy in an effective way. So-called morality, economic development, or sense gratification, these are also by the benediction of the Lord that we have this opportunity. So being a responsible king, Prithu Maharaj recommends that everyone take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus be immediately purified. So again, this is what we're learning under the guidance of the spiritual master, under the guidance of senior devotees, under the guidance of our god brothers, god sisters, managers within our movement. We're having the opportunity, developing the art, science, and culture of understanding how to take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, wherever we are in life and whatever stage we're at on the path. Because, you know, that's quite an enlivening thing, is that just by the inclination to serve the lotus feet of the Lord, that gives one the opportunity to learn the art, science, and culture of taking shelter of Krishna and purifying the mind after all these innumerable lifetimes. So in terms of the mind, because I guess some of the, you know, this is an important thing to understand, because the mind is something we don't necessarily see or are conscious of. Often our mind sort of entrances us in such a way that we think it's us. So the mind's constantly accepting and rejecting, and that we have what are called thought processing errors. So the way that we perceive the world, the way that we perceive others, the way that we perceive what others say and do often goes through the filter of the mind. And we identify with the mind so strongly that it becomes difficult to discriminate what's just actually a thought and what's real. So Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita about the mind having the opportunity to free us, to deliver us, or to bind us. So where the mind tends to go is where our consciousness often tends to follow, until we're quite set in the path of transcendence, and we can transcend the mind and see the mind for what it is. Often the mind can really grab us and capture us. So this idea of it delivering us, or if the mind is going to deliver us from material existence or bind us, comes down to what it is that we let our minds do. And the process of devotional service is to gradually learn to engage the mind in Krishna's service. So that's why, as I said, hearing, remembering, using the mind and intelligence to remember Krishna, to remember his instructions, to remember how it is that we're supposed to serve and appreciate devotees rather than see them in a material light. The nectar of instruction teaches us about the ways that we engage with devotees at different levels. So those more senior to us, there's an attitude of service and respect. To those that have been around the same time as us, or on a similar level in terms of their practice as us, you have camaraderie and kindness, and you help each other out. And then for those that are more junior to us, or more just beginning on the path, or then we treat with kindness and offer instruction and support, of how to develop further. So these are the instructions of how to, practice bhakti in our day-to-day life. And understanding the nature of the mind can be quite important, because, as I said, we tend to get hooked by it or think it's us. So we want to be careful about where the mind drags us or where the mind takes us, because that will often be a reflection of where our consciousness is at. So if our mind is dragging us to, being conscious of thinking errors and being conscious of the idea that we're subject to illusion, and sometimes the mind will take us to places that aren't necessarily factual, or take us away from our service, or take us away from appreciating our fellow Vaishnavas, or taking us to things that basically interrupt our steady flow in Krishna consciousness, or take us away from our service, take us away from things that help us progress in our spiritual life. So being conscious of that, knowing when to bring the mind back and when to sometimes just tune out from what the mind's saying and tune into what Prabhupada's saying, what the books are saying, hearing the holy name, taking the opportunity to engage in sharing the holy name with others, and to take the mind away from things that like to distract it. So, it is an interesting thing to be, check in during the day. Where's the mind at? Where's it taking me? And pulling it back. Because ultimately, as we're hearing here, being a responsible king, Preacher Maharaj recommends that everyone take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus be immediately purified. So if we can train the mind to do this at every moment within our day, by the time it comes to that, when we're leaving our body, that time of death, then we've already got the mind trained to take shelter of Krishna and to transcend the struggles and tribulations that occur with the material body. Lord Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita that simply by surrendering unto him, one is immediately relieved of all sinful reactions. As Krishna takes away all the sinful reactions of a person immediately upon his surrender unto him. Similarly, the external manifestation of Krishna, the representative of Krishna who acts as the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, takes all the resultant actions of the sinful life of the disciple immediately after the disciple's initiation. So this is quite a heavy burden that the spiritual master takes on behalf of the disciple. And it behooves the disciple to really do their best to stay following the path, set out through parampara, to really learn to take shelter of Krishna and Krishna's instructions. Because when the mind becomes distracted and sometimes if our mind becomes too absorbed in something, then our actions follow that absorption, and it can pull us away from the regulative principles of spiritual life. And then it can become more complex and more difficult, because then the material energy is just way back there in our hearts, minds, thoughts, actions, and draws us away from following the principles that we've accepted as disciples and within ISKCON. So really understanding that, this is what the spiritual teacher has done, taken all the resultant actions of the sinful life of the disciple immediately after the disciple's initiation. So we want to take this really seriously, because often in Kali Yuga, it's like, oh, well, that was important that day or that year, and now I'm different, I'm in a different place, and yeah, that's all good. But I guess, again, coming back to this idea that there's been many lives, innumerable lives. This is just one life. And if we can use this one life to try and get free from the clutches of material existence that have been around us for innumerable lifetimes, and then it makes more sense of where we are in the universe, where we are in our spiritual journey, where we are in the grander scheme of things, rather than just getting pulled back into this one life. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore stated, thus, if the disciple follows the principles instructed by the spiritual master, he remains purified and is not contaminated by the material infection. So it's just like if we were going to be bathing in the Ganges every day, and there's so much benefit, and Prabhupada quoted that man, the Brahmana who didn't take medicine from the doctor but bathed in the Ganges every day and was healthy and well. So similarly, if we bathe ourselves in the process of Krishna consciousness every day, to as much as we can, with the understanding that even though we go to work and we have to pay bills and there's so many things we have to do, we have our mind and consciousness with us at all times, and even externally we can be acting in such a way as, living in the world and doing what we need to. We can be cultivating this inner consciousness of constant remembrance, thoughtfulness of Krishna, and serving the devotees. So if we can daily have this idea that we follow these principles as instructed by the spiritual master, then we can't be contaminated by material infection. And that means that the mind's not going to be dragged away and dragging us into activities that are not conducive for our spiritual well-being. It means that we'll be able to stay clearly on the path and have that gradual cleansing that occurs through absorption and devotional service, through their gradual attention to our spiritual Krishna consciousness. So that's like bathing in the Ganges every day, which is pretty cool. Even down here in New Zealand, we can basically bathe in the Ganges every day by hearing and remembering and chanting about the glories of the Lord. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore stated that the spiritual master who plays the part of Krishna's representative has to consume all the sinful reactions of the disciple. Sometimes a spiritual master takes the risk of being overwhelmed by the sinful reactions of the disciples and undergoes a sort of tribulation due to their acceptance. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore advised that one not accept many disciples. So if we're in the privileged position of coming to Krishna consciousness, of accepting or aspiring for a bona fide spiritual master, then we understand this is a very serious process. It's something we need to take seriously, and it's something that we need to have some lifestyle management around, in terms of managing our lives in such a way that daily we can absorb ourselves in chanting the holy names and hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam, and associating with devotees in a way that promotes the good wishes of devotees, so that we get their blessings, so that we can continue in this path. Because the spiritual master has taken a big risk in accepting us as a disciple, so the disciple also has their duty in that regard. So again, these are wonderful instructions by Maharaj Paritu, and it's a wonderful part of the Srimad Bhagavatam, because there's some really nice, clear messages for all of us in terms of how it is that we can gradually progress in this amazing experience that is Krishna consciousness or spiritual consciousness. And because he's speaking to the citizens, then, just as us as citizens here in New Zealand, as human beings, within different ashrams, within different life stages, with different ages, there's instructions that are there for all of how to gradually advance. All right, so I will read the translation again. By the inclination to serve the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, suffering humanity can immediately cleanse the dirt which has accumulated in their minds during innumerable births. Like the Ganges water which emanates from the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord, such a process immediately cleanses the mind, and thus spiritual or Krishna consciousness gradually increases. So I'll end it there before I lose my voice. But does anybody have any corrections or comments or questions?
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
What a beautiful class in the morning. This is a very simple text, but very, very powerful. There's so much of instruction. Very simple way it is explained. And but the depth of this instruction is very, very great. And how to explain that every process is very simple, but we need to be inclined. That is the most important. The inclination is more important, and then acceptance is automatically comes. And Prabhupada has given the examples of Ganges water. It looks like not clean enough, but the power of Ganges water is so immense. Even the people in India, those who are close to Ganges, they always prefer this process to take bath right in the morning so that they cleanse up their sin. And throughout the day, whatever is accumulated, the next day it is cleansed up. So it is a regular process as we take bath every day to clean up our body, whatever the dirt it remains on the surface. Similarly, the Ganges water cleans up everything if we follow, we take bath every day. So powerful, because this is not a simple water as it comes through, but it is from the lotus feet of Lord. So it has all the full potency. If we take a chance of that, it will cleanse up everything. That inclination, understanding and inclination to understand that is very, very important. That's why Prabhupada is telling us, simply by surrendering unto lotus feet of Krishna, everything is sorted out. So as we are being far, far away from India, still the process can be followed all over the world, simply by taking the instructions from our Krishna consciousness through spiritual master, so that our connectivity remains and we know what is the process. Because process is very important, correct following. Like every day we take bath, so every day we take the Krishna consciousness right in the morning, cleanse our body, our mind, and the mind remains fresh. No matter what works we do throughout the day, it remains fresh. It is only realized, it cannot be seen, shown to anybody. So it is a personal realization. So very simple process, Prabhupada already established. Only inclination towards it is more important, and rest everything will follow. Yeah, that's the instruction and information used so nicely maintained and described with examples. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you very much for a very nice class in the morning, and particularly bringing the point that has come in this. We remember, I mean, when we read Bhagavad Gita in the beginning, in the introduction, Prabhupada has given, the Mahatma of Gita Mahatma, means what is the benefit of reading Bhagavad Gita, and it is one shloka is mentioned there, that is Molo Nirmochanam Pumsam Jalasnanam Dine Dine Shakrid Gitamrita Snanam Sangsara Malonashanam. That means one can cleanse himself daily by taking bath in water. But if one takes a bath even once in the sacred Ganges water of Bhagavad Gita, for him the doubt of material life is altogether vanished. It is telling that the importance of reading Bhagavad Gita. So what you have also nicely told, just as cleaning by taking bath in the Ganges, we can clean ourselves. Similarly, if we keep Bhagavad Gita in our life, in our daily activities, then we can remain pure. And by the mercy of the Guru and the Vaishnavas, and particularly the spiritual master who has accepted us, and by taking all our sins, as you have told, generated through life after life, and he has taken, it is our responsibility that we remain pure after that by our activities and our inclination to remain attached to the Lord, and by fully surrendering, which we have already surrendered. So we should continue with that, and that is the process by which we can get the mercy of the Lord. And because without the mercy of the Lord, nothing happens. We should understand that. And His mercy is flown through the Vaishnavas and the devotees. So we should associate with the devotees at the same time so that we remain in the right path always. Hare Krishna. This is my realization. Thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Madhuri. Sorry. Oh, go ahead.
Hare
Please go
Krishna,
ahead.
Rasayatra. Thank you so
Hare
much for your class. And it's very clear from this class how peaceful and in the mode of goodness that you are. And so my request is to those of us here at the ashram, Bhadrasane, Gatavali, myself, Caleb, and Balai are all listening to your class. How might we transcend the waves of passion and ignorance, even though we may be chanting, reading, serving, doing our best? How may we enter that higher mode so we can feel more peace? Krishna.
Thanks, Prabhu. I think as Maharaj Preeti said, remembering it's a gradual process. So there's the ups and the downs as we continue trying to become gradually purified. But by, I mean, the wonderful thing with your ashram there is that you've got the power of association to support one another in this daily process. So supporting one another to joyfully engage in the daily process of hearing and chanting and remembering, of associating and taking that consciousness out with you. That sometimes in our day-to-day lives it can feel like, oh, covered by passion and ignorance, and a little bit of goodness peeks through, and then I'm back to ignorance. And then sometimes we go out into the world and we talk to another person and we realize, oh, actually I'm in a much better space than what some other people are going through. So I think supporting one another to continue and with an understanding it's a gradual process and to stay with the process. And that sometimes, if we slip or there's a struggle, or it's okay. It's that idea of you get back on the horse, you get back to the daily process of gradual purification. And over time, we learn to, establish ourselves in a way that is the most supportive and progressive for us in terms of where we need to be to continue in our Krishna consciousness. And that can look different at different times, but always having that as the goal and the centerpiece, that we're supporting one another to be the best situated we can to gradually progress towards the ultimate goal. I hope that helps.
So any other devotee?
Hare Krishna, Madhuri, thank you for the wonderful class. Madhuri, you've been preaching for quite some time. Just like to get your reflection. What are the challenges you face when you transmit this thing? Right? We try to transmit this very nice process on the street. How are the normal kids reacting? What are the challenges? Thank you.
Well, there's innumerable challenges in spreading Krishna consciousness, and there's innumerable mercy in spreading Krishna consciousness. So you get the innumerable mercy in that you see the Lord, begin to see the Lord's hand in everything, and to see that He is indeed directing all the living entities within their hearts. And according to whether somebody has a little bit of an opportunity to connect with Krishna, sometimes when you're out literally on the streets or when you're engaged in outreach, the way that people treat you can almost be a reflection of how they're treating Krishna. So you learn to take it not so personally, because sometimes it can be really hard if someone's, just really not nice to you and you're like, what did I do? What did I even say? And you learn to gradually see, because you're there representing Krishna, how that person's treating you is actually how they're treating Krishna, which hurts your heart because Krishna is so wonderful and beautiful and is the source of everything. So why would anybody want to treat him like that in such a disrespectful way? That's our job on behalf of Lord Chaitanya, on behalf of Prabhupada, on behalf of our spiritual master, is to try and get other souls to at least have that inclination to start turning towards Krishna in whatever way that looks. So I think sometimes we think, right, I've got to make somebody a devotee, I've got to get them chanting Hare Krishna, I've got to get them following the 4 weeks, otherwise, it's useless, I haven't really done anything at all. And gradually over time, you see, actually, if we can influence every person we meet in some small way, that they're taking one small step towards Krishna, whatever capacity that may be, whether it's having some prasadam, whether it's a nice smile at a devotee, whether it's opening, somebody opening a door for a devotee, whether it's buying a book, whether it's studying the books, whether it's being favorable to Krishna consciousness, although not quite ready to commit. And then, of course, those that are actually ready to take up the process. All of those things are very exciting and enlivening, that if we can just be like a vehicle or a vessel in some small way to help one living entity become a little bit closer to Krishna, then that's the perfection. And I think as we develop that consciousness, it makes it easier to carry on with outreach, rather than thinking that it's got to be all or nothing, or it's got to be a particular thing. So learning to see Krishna in the heart of every person that we come across, whether we're overtly preaching, in terms of being out there on Harinam or book distribution, or whether it's a little more subtle. So if you're in your working environment and you're giving people prasadam and you're engaging them with them in a way that, they think you're a nice person, or there's something about you that they're a bit interested in, and then they might start asking questions. But just engaging in the world in a way that helps everybody we come across come a little bit closer to Krishna. Hope that answers your question or makes sense.
Thank you very much. Such a nice explanation. Unlimited challenges, unlimited message. I like that. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Dandot Pranam. Thank you so much for your wonderful realizations, as always. Really appreciated that. I really liked your point where you said, just like we don't get overwhelmed by what's happening in a single day, just we take like a circumstance a single day. So you just compared that to the lifetimes. So we have gone through so many lifetimes, and you advised us that let's not get overwhelmed by what's happening on this lifetime and think that this is the and don't allow that to affect our Krishna consciousness. So I really like that point. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you. Oh, well, thank you so much for your questions and realizations. And it's always very enlivening to have devotee association, even if it's via Zoom. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to read from the Srimad Bhagavatam today and to have your association.
Thank you. So Mataji, it appears there's no other person to make comments. So thank you very much for the nice class. And we are closing the class now.
Thank you.
Vancha
kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo
Anantakoti Vaishnava ki
Prabhupada ki jai.
jai.
Rasayatra Mataji ki
Jai.
Jai. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari.
Hari Hari.